so it's now being published, or it's been broadcast to my Google Plus page and also to my YouTube channel. So it's live now. So what's the normal score, Sam? You normally give people a few minutes to turn up?
Yeah, so I guess we're waiting for Martin. Anyone else you're expecting?
Yeah, I was expecting. Let me have a look.
Who have you actually? Who did you send the invite to? I guess because I think I found that actually the people who do reply on Google Plus to that invitation, they don't actually expect to be in the Hangout a lot of the time. So it's confusing on Google's part in terms of how you get people invited into it. It's slightly confusing because you don't know what people's intentions are when they've said that they're going to come. A lot of them just think they're just going to watch it anyway. So I would maybe.
And they've been broadcast as well.
Yeah, exactly. Not many people will want to turn up for the broadcast ones. Not to be on it anyway.
And yet here we are. So so there was myself. There was the three of us. There was Pavlo Maciutko, Michael Osborne, Leslie Evans, who's here, and Robert Hemmer, who I just couldn't find. There were a whole stack of Robert Hemmers. None of the profiles.
Try getting the actual link and pasting that into the onto the page, maybe. So the link to join us in here. That's one way around it.
That's how I got in. And honestly, I was curious about how this works because I've never done a Google Hangout. And I do a lot of work with teams in virtual space, so I wanted to see how people who really know what they're doing would do it.
You came to the wrong place.
No, that's okay, because I've always learned from my mistakes more than...
So we've got quite a few people viewing us. I've taken that link, Sam, as you said, I've posted it onto the registration page, for want of a better word, so it's on there now.
Cool. You might want to just ping Martin as well, because he, I don't know if you saw my email, but he has multiple Google accounts, and whenever I've tried to message him via finding him on the Hangout invite, it never finds the right account for him. So if you email him, he'll be straight in.
Right then. I've just had an email from him. Plussed up to the max, he says. Yeah, I sent it to whatever was the first Google Mail account that came up for Martin. So that's been sent there.
There he is.
Hi, Martin.
Hi, Craig. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. Not too bad. We finally got in. We're joined by Leslie this evening. Leslie's joined us.
Hi.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, I'm hiding behind my dog because I just came from the gym. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Was fleetingly.
Yeah.
So over to you guys.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, first hangout of the outstanding MOOC, and we thought obviously the first week of these things is always the busiest. There's always generally the most amount of people, the most amount of conversation. So we thought in this sort of next half an hour we just sort of look back at some of the things that stood out, the points which have generated the most conversation, and a few themes and stuff that has stuck out. But if anyone else has anything they want to sort of discuss, then it's pretty free-form agenda. But I thought it might be good to start by you, Craig, actually getting your reflections, because this is your first MOOC that you've designed and run. So I think it would be really interesting for everybody to hear from you, really, because you've obviously had that couple of weeks, months, however long you've been working on this before you get to this point, and it's gone live, and you're in there frantically replying to everybody that's on there, trying to get the party started like you do. I've been there. So yeah, just be keen to hear some of your reflections on how have you found the first week yourself from the Wrangler's point of view.
I think a bit busy. There you go, one-word answer, busy. Now, I imagine an element of that is self-imposed busyness. I imagine an element of that is naivety over running facilitating a MOOC, an expectation that that perhaps people, an expectation, I think, of to give something people a little different. I mean, I've been in MOOCs. I've done lots of MOOCs on huge scales with thousands and tens of thousands of people in them, and they've always felt a very impersonal experience. They've always felt I am just a number, and I am one of several thousand other numbers as well. So that's never felt great. So I wanted to try and give people in this first week something that felt a bit different, and that's why, as you quite rightly said, I've frantically been trying to get to everybody that you and Martin haven't been able to get to, and at least welcome them, and at least comment upon something that they've said once they've got beyond that initial stage. So one of their real contributions, if you like, beyond their introduction. I am very mindful, though, that that's probably not a scalable long-term strategy. And I'm also mindful that you know, I don't know, you couldn't do it, I don't think, with your thousands and your tens of thousands. That's probably why I've always felt it's been a little impersonal, and I'm not pretending for a second that I could replicate this if the numbers were even possibly marginally bigger than they are at the moment. So yeah, it's been busy, but I'm mindful that some of that has probably been self-imposed busyness.
I think that's something we've always experienced, is that we've tried to do that same thing, is that kind of responsibility of welcoming people on board, letting them know that someone out there is listening and paying attention. But it's really hard, isn't it? Because you go in there and you end up coming up with 3 or 4 different sort of stock phrases that you have to kind of recycle. You're trying to find something original to say each time, and you can become quite self-conscious that you're just repeating yourself. And it's trying to find like something meaningful to ask someone to try and engage them, and doing it at scale is really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There's stock messages, there's stock greetings, and I think I've kind of given up trying to come up with original greetings for when people first come in. I just default to my 3 or 4. I think when people actually start to contribute to the deep, reflective questions that you've put to them, and they're starting to come up with their own perceptions, their own experience, their own challenges, then I think it's been easier to give a more bespoke, personal response and have that interaction. But you're quite right, in those early stages where you're kind of everyone's really saying the same thing, there's not a great deal that you can do to give that personal touch.
Saskia, hi there. Thanks for joining us. You made it in. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, great for joining us. Thanks for your blog. I was just reading that earlier. How have you found it? How do you guys find it? And Leslie as well. Does it make a difference? Do you kind of what is the feeling when one of the facilitators comments or welcomes you? Does that make a difference? Have you been in experiences like this where that doesn't happen? Does it make you want to engage more?
Yes, I like it when somebody answers back, so that's a plus. I just follow the MOOC Social Learning in the Netherlands, also on the Curator platform, but I did that MOOC when everybody already left, so
okay.
I was very late, and there were no facilitators talking back. So I found that, yeah, just going and to get the content and asking and talking to myself, and that was not very stimulating.
But did you still carry on with that? Did you see that one through to the end or quite far?
Yes, I see. I get to the end. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. When Martin and I first started doing these, we had no idea that would happen. But most of the MOOCs get left open, and they become this other kind of experience. This sort of, I think Martin, you described it as like a sort of, it's like arriving at a party after it's finished. You can just sort of see the evidence of what's happened. But a lot of people, I think more people have been through them than in that sense than in the live sense, which is, to me, I think is really interesting. And I don't know, what kind of value do you think that offers to people who can possibly create MOOC or MOOC-like experiences for their organizations? Anyone?
I actually think it's a really valuable capacity to have. I have been working in educational publishing for, I hate to tell you how many years. I've been a small entity for 17 years, and I've worked with people from Lebanon to, Korea. And the face-to-face aspect, I think it's a very important component, but I was starting to wonder, one of the things I love about what you've done is to have that engagement with the community where people can respond to each other, and that's pretty I've seen it in a lot of MOOCs. I've checked out a lot of MOOCs. I'm wondering if there isn't some curation method to find people with like questions and be able to have a peer response. In other words, take some of the stress off of the wrangler but still provide that blended experience. And I don't know anything about it, I'm just thinking out loud. Because I do think that blended experience is an important component for engagement. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think as Craig said, when it gets to scale as well, it's really hard to make that happen. But one of the MOOCs that I did last year, I think it was data and learning analytics, which really set out to be quite innovative and try different things and try and innovate the MOOC thing. It was one of George Siemens was one of the people behind it, and they'd kind of invented a new platform, or were using a new platform for it. And one of the ways that worked was that you could ask questions through this tool, and it would then find the people on the MOOC who were doing well on those topics, and instead of pushing them to the instructors, it would push them to the highest performing people, if you like, however it measured that, and they would answer the questions. So there's definitely sort of technologies in that area being developed, and I think it's, when you get to that kind of scale, you need that kind of thing to make it work.
Well, I'm going to have to make one more comment, and then I actually have to shower and be somewhere. If you forgive me, I have another company that I'm trying to do with someone that's a little bit different, and one of the things we're looking at is the maker movement with just education across the board. And I think that this particular MOOC, part of the reason I signed up is because I think high school kids could create these. I think this would be a great way for them to share their knowledge, and I really would love to learn how to do it so that I can be involved in helping them do it, because people learn best from each other, and the old model of the way we used to teach is not so effective. But so I think this is a great offering, and I'm excited about it. My problem, like probably everyone here, is that we all get so busy with projects. So I'm going to do my level best to hang in with you guys, and thank you for indulging my chattiness.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I think that's a great idea. It's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make new things because the kids are so smart. I mean, they're just brilliant, and their time is squandered if you don't use it, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks. Have a great one. Nice to meet everyone.
You too. Thanks for joining us.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Martin, what stood out for you in the first week? Were any sort of key topics that have caught your eye?
It never ceases to amaze me when you ask the simplest questions, really, what you get back. So I think what is a MOOC is a very reasonable question to ask, and you only have to look at the hundreds of responses to see that A, there's no one answer to it, and B, it's evolving all the time. So, and I think that's really important, actually, for anyone that's considering doing this stuff, is that most people don't know what a MOOC is, even though there are tens of thousands of people doing them around the world. You can still walk into, I was at an event on Saturday, and I asked people what a MOOC is, and not everyone knew, and they work in L&D. So it's kind of that stands out for me, because I think sometimes we just have to ask the simplest question and take it from there. And when we do that, we start to understand that this is a really evolving area. So you got people like Donald Clark talking about hooks, VOOCs. I really like Thomas Jarrell's comment about, well, really you start with the OOC, and then you just add an A to Z of different approaches to learning at the front. And and kind of that's probably quite a good way to look at it. So I really like it. I like getting the basic bit because I think it kind of begins to show that it means different things to different people. It's taken in very different ways, and it's evolving quite rapidly. So I think we can talk about what's happening in education, but what's happening in corporate learning with these is quite different. And actually, we've got a space here to make our own story. And I think that's, we know a lot about what's going on in education. We know less about how this is being applied in the workplace. So it feels to me like we're still, there is no right and wrong here. People are doing MOOCs in very different ways, and what a MOOC is to people is also, quite a broad thing. So, and I like that.
Isn't it all a bit of a mess in a way? And like you said, you've got a lot of people who don't know what a MOOC is, and then you've got a load of people who have done a MOOC somewhere else, and then you've got us talking about using things from MOOCs in other ways. Isn't it just like massively confusing for people?
Potentially, but then, I mean, this is the world on the web. There are hundreds of tools changing all the time, and I think we need to get I think it's probably about getting a bit more comfortable with that very fact that you've just mentioned, and also understanding that actually, if this is a sort of messy, collaborative kind of process, then actually one-size-fits-all approach to this sort of experience is probably not going to work. Because in those comments, people are taking out very different experiences already after week one, after some quite simple questions. And I think that's quite interesting. So I think it's really understanding who you're doing, all the basics of who you're doing this for, what kind of experiences are you trying to design, but actually there's this massive issue of how that is experienced is going to be quite different for people. And what do you do about that? And what you do about that in this context is you see what people have to say. And then I think the experience can evolve and adapt. And so I think, although it seems quite scary and quite changeable, I think what you're doing is probably you have an opportunity to really connect with people in a way that maybe we haven't done in the past so well.
Cool. Sorry, I just checked. Is everyone else hearing the lots of pings? So I just wondering if that's people messaging or Q&Aing, and if anyone can see those.
I'm picking up the pings, but I can't. I've had a quick look at the Q&A, and I couldn't see any before, and I'm not seeing anybody new joining, so I don't quite know where they're coming from.
Stop pinging. But I think also it's a new way to learn for the participants. Like I write in my blog, it's a new way of learning within a MOOC, with using the new IT, with using Google Hangouts. For a lot of participants, it's new to use it well, to use your blog, to use Twitter. So I hope it's also a matter of time that the communication will start.
What's the kind of awareness like around MOOCs in the Netherlands?
It's a little bit in the starting phase of how do I call it? It's the MOOCs from Creator, from the MOOC Factory, from Francois and Jos. They become more familiar. Also the MOOC social learning, and it becomes more a tool for the L&D professionals. The universities, they don't use it a lot. I think England is there more. Is it more use of? Yeah, I don't know. More normal to use a MOOC, I think. It's here's the beginning.
Do you work in education or in the private sector?
Yes, yeah. Education, but in the so in a corporate organization.
Right. Okay. And in your organisation, if you were to talk to people about using MOOCs or something like that, would people know what you were talking about, or would they look at you strangely?
They look at me strangely. Yes, I have to explain what it is. And my colleagues, my L&D colleagues, they know what it is right now, but the employees who have to use it, they don't know it yet.
So how do you explain it to people?
Yeah, we're going to build a SPOC, and we're going to implement that SPOC by a small group of employees. So we try to make a success and implement it like that.
So you're
Yeah.
gonna sort of show them, let them experience it instead of trying to
Yes.
explain it, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds great. Nick, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Sorry, I'm late. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yep. Very good. We can hear you loud and clear.
Craig. Hi, Martin.
Hello.
Hi, is it Saskia?
Yes. Hi.
Hi there. How are you? You right?
I'm fine, thank you.
So we were just kind of talking about the sort of things that stood out really in the first week. Any kind of themes? Any sort of reflections? Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Nick?
To be honest with you, in terms of MOOCs and participation, probably as I've mentioned in the comments before, I've kind of, probably like a lot of people really, I have dipped in and out of them. And I think one of my comments was about kind of, I've just enrolled on some of the Future Learn ones, which I think, Sam, you may have enrolled on.
Yeah, I was just starting the
well.
digital storytelling one today.
Yeah, which is quite interesting. For me, a lot of things, I mean, I've participated in one or two before, and for me, a lot of things are around kind of the whole user experience and the whole user interface, and they can really, you know, it's all part of the engagement and content, etc., and participation. But a big thing for me is just about how we use MOOCs and how they kind of transition across different devices. Like tonight, I'm on a mini iPad, which is a completely different experience to being on an iMac. And it's interesting looking at different platforms that MOOCs sit on. So, for example, the Future Learn experience is a completely different experience on an iPad versus maybe something like Curator. And so for me, there's something there about how it's just kind of delivered as well, how it's spaced out, and I don't want to kind of dwell on that too long. The other things for me is also the thing that goes around in my head is about, we talk about, in a way, our MOOCs are like a form of community of practice, but there are also different types of communities of inquiry, and all the other labels that you put against it. So for me, there's kind of, who do we pitch this at when it comes to creating a MOOC, and is that part of the design process? I don't know if that goes back to you, Craig, when you came to designing this MOOC.
I had no particular. I mean, I knew that there would be people that were already Curator users. I knew that some of the audience would be people that were Curator partners. So a mixture of people that were already using it and just wanted to perhaps know how to use it better, or a mixture of people that were selling it to their clients and obviously wanted to understand it better. But I was also very mindful that given that we were going out to the masses through social media and through the Curator, through the HT2 website, that we'd attract people that had no use of Curator whatsoever, but may be aware of what a MOOC is. And as Martin alluded to a few minutes ago, we may have attracted people that had been on a Curator MOOC before or had dealt with HT2 before, but hadn't got a clue what the hell a MOOC was. And it was maybe only the course hub page that gave them that insight. So, an incredibly varied from the people that are already using it to build MOOCs, but they just want to know how to use it better, to the people that have never heard of Curator and had never heard of a MOOC until that tweet landed in their timeline or until that email arrived from somebody that had forwarded it on. So they're very difficult to design for. To a degree, we made a conscious decision in the early stages that we had to make a number of assumptions with this. The assumptions that we made were that people had, they got social learning, that they got it. They didn't need to be pitched it. They didn't need to be sold it. They got it. They also got I don't like the word gamification, so I won't use it again, but they got the use of of simple gaming mechanics to engage people and to foster further engagement and to get people to contribute and to work against others and also their own score and things. So we made assumptions around social and gamification and curation. We made a number of assumptions about that. That's why you'll find there's very little, if any, breakdown or background information about the three tenets really of Curator: game-based learning, social learning and curation. They're almost not dealt with in this MOOC, despite this MOOC being about how to use Curator, because that would have been an incredible piece of design to try to take 4 or 5 different subjects and put them all into one MOOC. So we didn't. We just focused on how to create a MOOC using Curator. We've given people in week 1 a little bit of background as to what a MOOC is, because it's been quite clear, as Martin said, that people have arrived and don't know what a MOOC is, and that's fine. That's why we did that. And we've also wanted to give people a broad insight into the good, the bad and the ugly, because perhaps not everybody, even though they're aware of what a MOOC is, maybe not everyone's been on one, maybe everyone's not had an opportunity to figure out whether their experience was good, bad or ugly. So that was the purpose of week 1, was to give this grounding before we launch into things that are starting to hone in a little bit more on the skills and the approaches to creating that MOOC, which started earlier today, as you know.
Yeah.
How would we're talking about the difference between FutureLearn, the way FutureLearn presents it, and the way Curator presents it at the moment, because it's really very similar, isn't it, in terms of the elements, and that it's content, pieces of content, or lists, playlists of content, if you like, and then conversation, which is connected to the content, which I think Curator and FutureLearn are the only ones that really do that. The others tend to have forums separate from content. I guess the main difference is there's no sort of gamification in FutureLearn. What were your sort of impressions of FutureLearn?
I think my observations with it, and I keep harboring on about this point, but there's a lot about UX and about what you're seeing with FutureLearn is I find it's very responsive, very adaptive to the device that I'm on. But there is something about, and I think a lot of people who are probably UX people will probably say there's a lot of white space around text. There's a lot of white space around the area. So it kind of, as you kind of look at it in a portrait mode, for example, then it just kind of, it's a lot easier on the eye. There's not so much going on. It's kind of, as you go down the page, there's your text, there's your media, etc. It's so simple. And I think, probably a lot of people will probably say the simpler it is in terms of that user interface and that design, the more engaging it will be. And I think you probably see that in a lot of websites these days in terms of how the readability of it. So that for me is, but the thing that for me, I find it quite difficult to follow is just the whole comments thing, especially when you see 335 comments. Oh my gosh, and I think maybe I saw a comment about, does somebody storify it, or as part of the curation process as well? Actually, it's for you to go in and pick out what are the best bits of learning for you, and then to kind of interpret that in your own way. And that's probably the thing that, 363 comments. Oh my gosh, where do I begin?
Yeah, and I agree. I was looking at it at lunchtime today, and it did put me off. I couldn't be bothered to comment. You're looking at, what's the point? And I think partly because it's not necessary to comment. I was just trying to whiz through as quickly as possible. And I think the opening sort of topic maybe wasn't something I was so engaged in. I was probably looking forward to some stuff happening later on, but you don't kind of feel. So I think sometimes I question the use of game mechanics and is that necessary? But it does prompt people to engage more. And when it's not there, I personally don't do it as much. So there's definitely value. But game mechanics are always controversial, aren't they? So how do people feel about that? The use of that in something like this?
I think we've had a couple of comments this week. 1 or 2, and of course for every 1 or 2 people that are typing it, I'm sure there are people that are thinking it and just aren't committing it to the keyboard. But there's been 1 or 2 where people have felt that they've, I don't have an opinion on everything, so stop asking me to make an opinion on everything. And as, no, we don't. you only have to, you have to have an opinion on something, and you have to have an opinion on 50% of the things because that's what the pass mark that level's set at. But it did make me think. I know that you don't have to comment on everything. I know that you don't have to view everything. I know that you only have to get 50% of the points that are available to move on. But obviously, a couple of people didn't, so it did make me question. One, is it obvious enough on that level home screen, or have I not communicated it enough in the alternate day emails that go out? Which is why you might have noticed on either Friday, in fact today's email that went out, I was quite overt about the fact about please don't think you have to comment on everything. So I'm sure it's a combination of my comms, maybe the wording within Curator itself, but yeah, it's obviously it's not worked for some people, Sam, to answer your question, in this MOOC that's running at the moment.
It is. I mean, it always comes up, and it's definitely not a new thing.
Oh, good. I'll take some.
Sam, sorry. Can I just raise the point? And apologies if you've raised this earlier, but I know MOOCs are massive and all that, but there's probably there is probably terminology for this different type of MOOC, which is one that is actually in a way constrained by the numbers, and therefore it facilitates that conversation, and therefore entices more. The fewer people you have, possibly entices more people to go through those comments and to contribute there. Is there anything in that or not?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we use Curator in the company I work for to run. Well, we've been running leadership courses on it with maybe 20, 30 people on a course, and there, we see phenomenal engagement with it because the way it's designed is it's part of a sort of change program going on. You've got the senior managers in there with the newer managers, and a lot of the content they're contributing are videos of like the senior managers posing problems that they have or problems that the business has and asking for input on these things. And in situations like that, I think it's great because you're using this is where the MOOC word becomes a problem, because you're saying, well, you're using a MOOC. You're using Curator. You're creating an online experience, an online learning experience for a group of people. Forget all of the acronyms, TOCOX, SPOCs, whatever you want to call them. It's just a tool that you're using to help people get where they want to go. So the possibilities are really endless. You can do whatever you want with these things.
I think it's interesting about the scale of the comments, and we were talking about how you might be able to group people. I'm sure there'll be some machine learning ways of mining data, through semantic search and all the rest of it. I'm sure, on large scale events with tens of thousands of people, then that will get more sophisticated, and it might be good. But I think the interesting thing is that on a smaller scale like this one, I think it's worth bearing in mind what happens. Actually, it sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but some people drop in and drop out. Some people like leaderboards and they don't. I think mechanics like that do help things move along. But why is it that in the previous MOOCs that we've designed, more people have completed them when they've gone through it after the synchronous bit has happened? Explain that to me. I mean, there are lots and lots of things we don't quite understand, but people are having great experiences when there's no one there. They're just picking through the conversation, and that's not a problem for them. So I don't know the answers, but I think it's just quite interesting sort of experiences that people are having. I think ultimately these are like web-like learning experiences, something that Sam and I talk about. It's just these platforms are contemporary. They enable you to relatively easily consume content and talk to other people, and a lot of learning technology hasn't been able to do that in this way. So I think that's why they're very powerful, whether it's Curator or something similar.
Cool.
Can I just...
Sure, go for it.
Sorry. Just one thing. Sorry to kind of hijack the conversation, but the other thing is, and you, Craig, Martin, Sam, as the kind of wranglers of this, is this thing about, in effect, am I right to say that you're in effect you're kind of community managers in this, but also there's a sense here I almost want to say that you're almost social media managers as well, because part of what you're trying to do is obviously trying to entice people to participate from the start and engage with it at the start. But there's got to be that kind of motivation to want to continue with it. As Ben alluded in one of his topics about people who will swing, and then trying to bring those people. So there's a big chunk of your work, obviously, is about community management. Is that more than you anticipated?
Can I just quickly jump in? I wouldn't. My concern about using terms like community is that online community management is a really difficult job, and it takes time to grow communities. And I personally don't see it like that. I see this as being a facilitation job. I see it more like a party. I mean, we're discussing in it about conferences. I think it's a moment in time where it's live, and there's a moment in time when it's not, and people experience it in different ways. But while we're doing it, I think it's a facilitation, right? This is like online facilitation. That's how I would see it. Others might disagree.
I don't know. I think it's kind of like, I'd say you're both right in a way. It's kind of like a pop-up community, if you like. And people have been talking actually this week about, well, you know, some people have been disappointed with previous MOOCs they've done, that the connections they'd made in the MOOC or wherever it was didn't end up in sort of ongoing things, or they'd kind of hoped that the discussions would evolve into communities, more sort of longer lasting things, and they didn't. And I think that's the nature of communities, isn't it? They last as long as they're needed. As long as the people in them are willing to make them last. And most of the time with these, the curated ones, they are like, they're pop-ups, like pop-up shops at Christmas. They come for a few weeks and then they're gone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Sam. I've done a lot of MOOCs like you know, many of the people here have been, and some of them have been for the big providers like Coursera, so they've been, you know, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people will have been in the same MOOC as me at some point over the last 2 years, and I know I can count on one hand the amount of people that I've still got a connection with from those tens of thousands of people. So I think maybe people's expectation that we all come together at this one point and that we're all going to remain this community once the MOOC is over, that we're all going to, I don't know, it just feels a little naive. Ooh, I said it.
But I don't see it. Don't forget, it's not just about people. It's about ideas and content, and I think that's really important. That's why I see it more as a facilitation thing. It's like if I connect someone with an idea that helps them do what they're going to do, then the job's done. You know, it might be that you're there to connect with other people, but it's not necessarily that. It can be experienced in quite different ways.
Yes, and it's also about group dynamic, I think. In face-to-face training, it all depends on the group and how the group is. Does the group has a natural leader? I think also in a MOOC, the group dynamic and what the participants will do makes the learning experience what it is. If there are participants that don't ask questions, then the MOOC will be just like self-study material. But if there is a leader or a few leaders that feel, how do I say it, that they have to participate or they have to have an active learning. I would like to say it in Dutch. That's a lot better for me. But I think it depends on group's dynamic.
Yeah, that's a great point, and because of that, you're going to get a different experience every time you run one. So you could run this same MOOC again with 100 different people, and it would be quite different because a large part of it is the conversation that happens around it, and you could go through and actually analyze the people. There'll probably be like maybe 4 or 5 people who are responsible for triggering 80% of the actual conversations that have gone on in the MOOC so far, and by that I mean the comments that have led to 2 or 3 other comments. You know, people actually having some communication with each other. I think there's a small number of people that have triggered those things, and that's always going to be the case, like you say.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I think we're out of time because we're scheduled for half an hour and we've run over a little bit. So I just want to say thank you very much for everyone who's joined us and watched us. Sorry we had a few problems at the start. That is the delights of Google+. We'll be slicker next week. But yeah, we'll be back again same time next week. And if you'd like to join us live, then you're more than welcome to. Just head to the invite page, which will be out in the regular curator emails, and join us if you can. Thanks for coming.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
Sam.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.